Hello, my name is Walter McGroy and this is Call of the Runes. And today we're talking about Naudiz, the second rune of the second Ed. Naudiz is the rune of fate and it's represented by the phonetical sound N or N. Etymologically, this rune is linked to both the English word need and the Dutch word noodlot, which means an unfortunate but unescapable event. Destiny is that what must come to pass, just as the gods are stuck on their path to Ragnarok. In this rune we're going to talk about the Norns, and we're going to talk about fate. And with that, let us begin. We're going to start with the Norwegian rune poem. And the Norwegian rune poem reads, "Constraint gives scant choice. A naked man is chilled by the frost." In that way, the Norwegian rune poem gives a concise summary of the Nordic view of predestination versus free choice. At birth, many things are fixed. Family, geographic location, your genetic gifts, or maybe your genetic disadvantages. The Nordic people believed that the choices in life could not change your destiny, and that is contrary to a common paradigm today, where we believe that we are entirely in charge of our own fate, manifest destiny. Your choices set you on a path and in a way limit all the choices that you're going to make in the future. You're never completely free. Opportunities are constrained by outside influences such as social and economical climate and also the choices of others. Those are the type of constraints referred to in the first line of the poem. The second line echoes the meaning of the first. A naked man cannot choose whether he is chilled by the frost. We're going to get back to that a little bit later, but there's two concepts that are very important if we're understanding the word Naudiz. And these words are Wyrd and Oorlog. Wyrd comes from the same root as the German word werden and the Dutch word worden, both meaning to become. So Wyrd comes from to become. Wyrd is the force that moves you from who you are to who you will become based on your choices. In the sagas, they say that heroes do not fear battle or death because the day that they will die is already written, and that implies that you cannot change your destiny. However, Wyrd, to become, is how you live your life under the constraints that you have been given. The poet Robert Bolt said, "Death comes to us all." That is fixed. But how you live is yet to be determined. You cannot escape your Wyrd, and your Wyrd is the result of your own actions. But with your own actions, you can influence your life's direction to see what comes up next. So Wyrd is the consequence of your actions, but within that restraint, you are free to choose your own actions to move towards a path that you wish to go through. Oorlog is a compound word, and it's the other word that we're going to talk about. It's a compound word because it comprises of two parts. Ur, meaning primal, as we've seen with Urus, and log, meaning law. Oorlog is the universal law. It is the what goes up must come down. Oorlog is the destiny woven for us at the time of our birth by the Norns. It is absolutely unescapable, and it's the fixed points, the ones that we do not have our own influence over. If we contrast the two, Oorlog is the constraint referred to in the Norwegian rune poem. Wyrd is the consequences of the choices that we make within the constraints that we're born with. A naked man will get chilled in the frost. This is Oorlog. There's no escaping that. But the path that led him to be in the frost, naked, or where he goes afterwards, is not yet set. How his story continues is based on choices that he is going to make, and how he got there is possibly based on choices that he made before. The end result of those choices is his Wyrd. Going over to the Icelandic rune poem. Constraint and grief of the thrall maiden, and a state of oppression and toilsome work. The constraint referred to in the Icelandic rune poem is again Urlog. To the Nordic people, the status one was born with, and the rules governing that class are as much natural law as gravity, or the changing of the seasons. Of the classes, the thralls that are talked about, the thrall maid in this poem, are the lowest of the three castes in Nordic social structure. And they worked more or less in the same way as slaves. There's a couple of exceptions there. Thralls are sometimes captured in raids and brought back, or it could be put in there because they were in debt. Thrall was not an easy position. It was hard work, but there was a limited amount of social mobility, which means that you can pay off your debt, or even if you were in a raid captured, and become a free person. So there was some social mobility, yet it was still a very, very harsh way of living. The final rune poem is the Anglo-Saxon rune poem. Trouble is oppressive to the heart, yet often it proves a source of help and salvation to the children of men. To everyone who heeds it betimes. Guth wrote, in limitations the master reveals himself, and that means that under constraints we can see true strength. When we put restraints on your actions, we can see what you can do within those limitations, and that is where you can see a measure of true skill. The Anglo-Saxon rune poem shows with it then a more positive side to this rune, in that same spirit. A life without hardship will not be sung about in the sagas, and it will not earn you a seat in Odin's hall. Hardship is not a punishment of the gods to be suffered meekly, but a test of true character in that regard. This idea comes back, or this harsh view of life comes back in Havamal 77. Cattle die and kinsmen die, and so one dies oneself, but a noble name will never die, if good renown one gets. So it's death comes to us all, but it is how you have lived your life, how you have fought your way through that hardship, which in the end defines who you are as a person. Almost all the sagas end in hardship. Almost all the heroes die or end in tragical circumstances. And not even the gods in these in the sagas will escape unharmed. Most of the gods will end with their death at Ragnarok. It's not the self-sacrifice here that is celebrated. It's not a meekly walking through the gallows, but it's a trying and going on, even though you know with full knowledge that each step might be your last. Each next step might be your last, and yet you keep going on. Yet you persevere. We see Naudiz in several charms and amulets. As rune of Urlog, the force that fixes destiny in its place, it is an obvious choice for those who want to use the runes to guide the ebb and flow of fate. In two of the other videos, we've already talked about how Naudiz was used in combination with Anzes to create a pattern where people use the Naudiz rune to call upon fate or the Norns, and the Anzes rune to call upon Odin, and so then a third rune, Algis or Thorisas, in the two examples, to fix that into fate. So that's a combination that arises a couple of times, but now this is also used on its own. In Sigtryggfruma, the Valkyrie Brunhilde teaches Sigurd, the hero of the poem, both wisdom and rune magic. Most of the runic secrets are never fully explained, and the exact way of they worked can now only be guessed at. Snorri, who wrote them down, was a Christian. He was not interested so much in the exact things, but more writing them down as a curiosity. And maybe that knowledge was there once. Maybe it was always only mythical. Maybe it was just so commonly known that it was just given as common knowledge and therefore not written down. But at the very least, we don't know exactly what is meant with these verses anymore. But we do know that Naudiz is explicitly named. Here comes Secret Roman number 7. Ill runes learn that with lies the wife of another betrays not thy trust. On the horn thou shalt write, and on the back of thy hands, and Naudiz shalt mark on thy nails. Thou shalt bless the draught, and danger escape, and cast a leak in the cup. Some of these things we can decipher. The Naudiz rune is very clear. The leek is a symbol that is used for power and strength, and we'll get to that in the video on the Lacus rune. But what the writing on the cup was and the writing on the hands, we no longer know. In cultural relevance, we see that fate, the force that Naudiz represents, is mostly tied to the feminine. Tacitus, the Roman historian, describes in his book of histories the account of the prophetess Veleda, and it goes as follows. Veleda, a maiden of the tribe of the Brusteri, who possessed extensive dominion, for by ancient usage the German attributed to many of their women prophetic powers, and, as the superstition grew in strength, even actual divinity. The authority of Veleda was then at its height, because she had foretold the success of the Germans and the destruction of the legions, Germania 61. And we can find a similar account written down by Julius Caesar himself in his history of the war against the Gauls. When Caesar inquired of his prisoners wherefore Ariostomus did not come to an engagement, he discovered this to be the reason, that among the Germans it was the custom for their matrons to pronounce from lots and divinations whether it was expedient that the battle should be engaged or not, and that they had said that it was not the will of the heaven that the Germans should conquer, if they engaged in battle before the new moon. These women, who are referred to in the quotes, are called völva. And in the Nordic cultures, they were prophetess, but also the practitioners of a magic called Sæther, which was reserved for women and for Odin, because Odin searched for all the magical knowledge that he could get and all the wisdom that he could get, and therefore he also studied in the women's magic. And if by Loki he was ridiculed for this a little bit, but Odin felt that learning this magic was more important than gender roles. They traveled with their retinue from village to village to offer their services. We know that the völva were highly respected and generously compensated for their assistance from the sagas and from archaeological finds. In Eirik's saga, the arrival of a völva is offered the high seat, usually reserved for the jarl or the king of that tribe. In Völuspá, even Odin visits a völva to seek knowledge of the future. So Odin, who is already knowledgeable about the future and a seer in his own right, seeks the assistance of a prophetess to get a better idea of what the future will hold. On top of that, all the Norns, the 3 Norns that we usually know of, but according to the sagas, there's more than just the 3 main Norns, and all the other Disir, the spirits of Wyrd and Oorlog, are all women. This is the Fjölga, Haminga, the spirits that protect the families, the Valkyrie. These spirits that govern the fate are all described as women. In conclusion, Naudiz is a rune of Oorlog. that which must come to pass, the very fundamental laws that govern the universe. The rune represents the boundaries that constrain us and force us into action. These limitations allow us to find orientation to where we want to go, and in this way it is also a rune of the Norns. Naudiz represents external restraints, and in readings it points at what in your life is limiting your options. And it could also mean that a pivotal point has come into your life and that it's approaching a point of no return or a point that you cannot avoid. This rune on its own is hard to read. For many questions, it just says this event is inevitable. But in combination with other runes, it might be seen what exact event we're looking at. For instance, in combination with Tiwaz, the justice rune, it can point to constraints imposed by law. Or with Othella, the ancestor rune, it can imply the inescapable events flowing out of your family or out of your heritage. Now this, however, does not necessarily have to mean that hardship is coming. If you combine now this with Wunyo, for example, this would be inescapable joy or unescapable happiness that is coming your way. That is the end of Naudiz, the rune of fate. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. If you would like to read more about what I just said, the book Call of the Runes has all the information I just gave, plus a lot more, and is available on Amazon. The link is down in the description. Please let me know what you find of these videos in the comments, and I hope to see you next week. Goodbye.